Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. I am Adesua Omorwan.
And I'm Rufai Adesuwa. To join me here again, Adesuwa.
Good to have you.
On the 4th of June 1996, Kudirat Abiola was killed fighting for democracy. Today we take a look at her legacies and even the issue of democracy in Nigeria at last. So joining us today to talk about this and more is Comrade Ayo Adewale, and we also have with us Abdulmumin Abiola, that's Kudirat Abiola's son, herself joining us, and it's a very somber one being here. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good.
Great to have you, and how are you doing, sir?
I'm fine, thanks for having us.
Great. I just want you to talk us through those moments of the struggle leading up to Kudirat Abiola's death on the 4th of June, 1996.
Well, these were very terrible times, very terrible times. I pray we never get to see such time again. These were times whereby you go out, you're not even sure of coming back in. There were lots of turbulence within the political and social system in Nigeria. Kudirat Abiola was a very joyful, happy woman that loved her family very well and loved her husband. And the Nigerian people wanted Chief M.K. Abiola to be president of Nigeria. An election took place. He ran all the campaigns and all of that. And he won the election. At the course of declaring the result, suddenly we had an announcement, more like a coup announcement, that the election had been result had been set aside, had been annulled, and that more information will be given as time unfolded. A lot of people went on the street to reject such announcement and that Chief M.K. Abiola be announced as the winner of that election, because figures were being picked as results were announced at various polling centers, just as we have today. And there were situation centers, situation room. People were calling. The only difference is that we don't have a social media to actually showcase what was happening. And the next thing we saw was the military on the street. Nigerian street everywhere, people were being picked, arrested, demonstration started, people were killed on the street, and Abiola was also arrested, and all of that. Before his arrest, he had gone to Ekpetedo to declare himself as the true winner of the election, and that's the that's the best any reasonable person would have done, which he did, because it is highly illegal to be legal in an illegal society. And the people were behind him, and negotiations commenced. International communities came in, trying to talk Abiola to renegade his mandate. And he looked back. I mean, what are people talking about? A lot of people have died. It's not about me now. It's about Nigerian people. So if I walk back home to continue my business, what happened to the hope that people had in that particular process? Not just about him. And the process that would have enthroned an egalitarian system into our system in Nigeria, a system where hunger would have been a thing of the past, a system where we would have had qualitative and quantitative education in Nigeria that is free, a system where the healthcare will run for free and people will get good medical care, a system where 24 hours of energy is in abundance.
So I just want to bring up the moment into it. I mean, what was that day like for you? You remember that day like yesterday, 4th of June? 1996. I know it's a tough one for you.
Yeah, well, thank you again for having me. 4th of June, 1996. It was a bad day. I actually had a dream that something was I actually felt something was going to happen. I always get these feelings at certain times. So I had a feeling, and I think it was a school day, so I was supposed to be getting ready for school. And my mom came to find me not dressed. She wondered why. And I said, Mom, I don't want to go to school today. I want to follow you. And I wasn't really doing too well in school back then. Apparently my report card was in all red. I didn't know that it meant, I just thought maybe my teacher only had a red biro. I didn't know I wasn't doing well. So I wasn't really doing well in school. So my mom, I just assumed that I just didn't like school. So it wasn't more like, oh, he just doesn't want to go to school. It was more like, oh, he doesn't like school. I'm going to force him. He has to understand that education is important, so he's going to go to school. it was a big deal because I remember Jo Odumaki, she was at the house that day. She spent the night at the house. So she heard me like crying that I didn't want to go to school, and I was dragged out of the house into the car, and I ended up going to school to come back home, and she wasn't there anymore. So it's like, I think I had a feeling that something was gonna go wrong that day, and I really wanted to follow her. My intentions actually, as if I was still young, I think I was about 8 years old, and my intention was that something was gonna go wrong, but if it did, and I was in that car, I should have been able to protect my mom. I think that was my idea of I wanted to follow her. It's not that I didn't want to go anywhere, I just didn't want to go to school because if I was in school, I wouldn't have been with her. I think that was the difference.
Let me talk to you, Mr. Ayodele. 22 women, including Kudirat Abiola, would be inducted into the Nigerian Women Hall of Fame for their iconic contributions to democracy in a couple of days. Do you think that this is enough?
Well, it's a wonderful thing. You see, people that forget their history will go into oblivion. It's a wonderful thing that the Buhari administration has decided to put these iconic women in the Hall of Fame, you understand, so that many generations yet unborn will come to learn about them, read about them, and of course decide to pick from the courage that they used to live their time and of course mold themselves into what is proper for society. It's good, but it shouldn't end there. We should also look at what they actually struggled for, what they stood for, and try to implement it, even in their death. And that will give them a respite wherever they are. Because if we don't achieve what they stood for, then whatever we have done or we are doing for them is just a mere marking. But when we achieve it, just like it's done in America, when Rosa, whatever her name is,
Eleanor Roosevelt.
she stood in the bus and said
Rosa
no.
Parks.
Rosa Parks. She stood in the bus and said no to tyranny. And that ignited a revolution. And today we've had an American president that is black. Today the rights of the black man all over the world is respected because of a woman saying no. So the same thing Kudirat Abiola did and several of those women had done. And the best thing for us to do is to continue from where they have stopped and implement their visions.
What would you say was her biggest legacy?
Oh, well, you have to remember that back around the time my mom was talking, women were not really outspoken to that extent. And not to mention that she wasn't just only talking to a civilian, she was talking to a military person, a military man, you know. So, you know, it just showed that, you know, women do also have a voice. I think it's important that, you know, in furthering the legacy of my mom, we have more women participation in our democracy. I think my sister was going under the lines of affirmative action, where we can have like a quota for women participation. I, for one, believe that women are already participating in our democracy, but if the quota system is just so that we can just encourage women to participate, not to say that, okay, if you have 30% quota system, then 30% is the cutoff mark. We're saying we want more than 30%, but if we get 30% is like a quota for just women, it might be a good thing, because I think by infusing them into our policy, we will end up, you know, doing the best for the nation as a whole. So I think one of the things that I'll say, okay, maybe we haven't really gotten, we haven't gone ahead is women participation. I think last year, or last tenure, we were about 5.8%. Now we're about 4.6%. That's not right, especially when you look at the people who actually go out and vote. It's not really the men that actually vote for our leaders. It's mostly women. So we can look into these things like that.
Okay, let's talk about a word a lot of people in the room will not want to talk about: justice. Because for you to even honor somebody and say, okay, you're inducted into the Hall of Fame, these things are so easy to do, but you can't do this without justice coming back to the family, because people have been hurt in this, and there must be seeming some level of justice. I mean, has that been that journey for you? And I also want to, you know, segue into the fact that Alhaji M.K. Abiola, blessed memories, did fight a lot for reparation by the colonialist slave masters. He was the only person in history, in African history, that fought a lot for the colonial masters to return everything they stole from us. But his properties too are in need of that reparation. I just wanted you to talk us through all of that.
Well, first of all, I believe that Yeah, my father was a champion for reparations, and I strongly believe, rightly so, if the Jews could get reparations for I think about 10 years or even less of incarceration, then what do you do to the black race that were incarcerated for like hundreds of years? I definitely think we should. And my father said something back then. He says, you know, the West can always look at Africa and say, why is Africa so backwards? And he said, is likened to cutting somebody's legs off and saying run. You know, we're really disadvantaged, and it's important that we start looking towards that direction. When it comes to for the family, I know that I was really young then, but I know that once the election was annulled, most of my father's businesses were shut down. People were laid off, and you see, the Abiola family, as considered now, we have about, I think we're about 55 kids. If you think about the general family of the Abiola, where the people who worked for my dad's companies, were more than more than 10,000 people. So I really believe that it's not necessarily because I've been able to meet some of the people who worked in Concord, Abiola Farms, the RCN and things like that. And I've noticed that, you know, they were just as shocked as we were with the whole situation as it went down. And some of them lost their jobs, families. Some of them are not even alive as we speak. So for me, it will be more I'll look towards a general holistic approach of everybody who was involved, because we talk about Abiola as somebody who got killed, but there were so many people who were part of that struggle, who lost businesses, lost lives, lost loved ones, and nobody's really addressing that. So the Abiola, I think we shouldn't make June 12 about the Abiola family alone, but about almost everybody who was part of that struggle, who actually left. I think there's this family, it's the Igbo family, the Obioras. The family was extremely wealthy, but based on his relationship with my father, he lost all his companies, he lost everything. So you know, there's so many like that, and I know.
So not only people, you know, people related to close to your father, to their properties were taken away from them by the government.
Basically because of association. They believe that if my father had any friends, if people saw that it would be bad to be associated with Abiola, then nobody would, which is understandable. But like, but if we're going to try to mend bridges, I think these are some of the things we should want to address, because there's a lot of people who are now who are hurt from that whole.
You want to talk through that, Ayo, because I know there's some other properties, you know, somewhere that were all, you know, taken by the government and things like that, and you never know who's watching.
Well, first and foremost, I will thank President Buhari and his administration for taking bold steps to heal the wounds, a lot of wounds. Looking from the standpoint of the Biafran soldiers, President Buhari came and paid the outstanding salaries that were not paid. He also did the same thing for the aviation workers in Nigerian Airways. We're also praying and hoping that he will also do the same for those who lost their properties during the June 12 struggle, starting from the Abiola family. Take, for instance, the Concord newspaper. Concord property was seized by the military administration, was incapacitated and all of that. Salaries were not paid to workers for several years, and many of them went, and some of them are dead.
We'll quickly go to break. We'll come back. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Great to have you back. You're still watching the morning show here on the Rise News, and we still have with us in the studio Abdulmumin Abiola and Ayo Adewale. Thank you for sticking with us. We're talking about repatriation of the Abiola wealth. Before I went on that break, you want to land on that thought?
Well, for easy understanding, because reparation is a big word and people get scared away from it. Let's just call it compensation. Compensation. Our businesses were crippled and properties were taken. Those properties, some of them have been given back, but not all of them. Bank accounts were frozen. Not all the bank accounts. Till date. And if the administration want to get to know all those bank accounts, they should talk to the DMI and, of course, talk to the DSS. They will help to give them information and, of course, talk to the CBN. Abiola was very wealthy. At a point, people felt he was even wealthier than Nigeria. He was a member of the Paris Club. So you can imagine the amount of wealth that he controlled and the amount of bank accounts that he will have that his family might not even know of, except very closely related business staffs and all of that. So if those accounts can be brought out and be given back to the family in the fullness of the what do you call this thing now? The spirit of reconciliation and all of that.
Especially
and of course,
as
the value of the fund.
The federal government seems to have recognized him. Well, in part, they will say as the winner of the June 12 elections. I know at the 23rd commemoration of Kudirat Abiola some days ago, human rights activist Joe Kildemaki was calling for the president to pay, for the federal government to begin to pay his entitlements. If you do agree that he won the election, then he should be seen as one-time president of Nigeria and should be paid the entitlements that come with that title.
Definitely.
But earlier he talked about the decline of women in politics. And we've also talked about lessons, that could be learned. As we draw closer to another June 12, which is the new Democracy Day in Nigeria, when you look at the electoral process so far, would you say we have learned any lessons really from June 12, 1993?
I would say yes, we have learned. We have learned, particularly this administration, have learned it. Successive administrations have passed that governed this country for 16 years, never learned nothing. And how do I mean? If you look at provision of infrastructure, you cannot aggregately measure the gains of this administration with past administration. This administration has gained a lot in terms of provision of infrastructure for the Nigerian people compared to the past. And in terms of lessons learned also, the manner in which monies were spent during the elections, especially by the ruling party, you understand, is not commensurate to what was spent in the past, previous one. At the previous government, we saw a situation whereby a president was giving out monies by himself. But this president, Buhari, said, I'm not going to spend money.
Which president are you referring to?
I'm talking about the Jonathan administration. President Buhari said, I'm not going to spend money. I'm going to run the election on my pedigree. We also look at involvement of the presidency in other elections.
But there were cases of a lot of money being ferried around in bullion vans. And
Different
Name one.
I
just gave you
the
one.
bullion van story.
We heard of the $2 billion that was shared by the security advisor to the President Jonathan, that the case is still in court, is alleged, is still in court, and you heard people say they took the money.
But Rufai just mentioned one case that was popularly talked about, the bullion van issue on the day of elections.
I wouldn't know about the bullion van issue.
You don't know about the bullion van issue?
It was so out there that, this person said, it's my money.
I don't know about that.
And I have the right to,
there you go.
to put it. In fact, even the popular singer Olamide recently released a song called Oil and Gas and say,
let me give you an account from Alhaji Dangote. He was at an event of, I think, what was this man called? Mo Ibrahim. Dangote said, when they told him he's rich, that he didn't really see how rich he was until when he went to the bank, withdrew, was it about $10 million?
Put it in a boot.
He brought it back home and looked at his money and he took it back to the bank. Let's assume that was the case that happened with the bullion van episode.
So will you put a bullion van in $10 million? Will you put a $10 million in bullion van?
If I have a reason to get money, my legitimate money from the bank to my home in order to give anybody, I will too.
You do it in a bullion van.
Which medium is the most secured
you
to getting that money to my house?
You were once a local government chairman in Lagos.
I said if.
Is there any political party who does not spend money during elections? Did you not spend money during elections?
I didn't spend money. I ran my election on goodwill. You can go and verify. In fact, the last election that I ran in my local government supporting a candidate, when my members were asking me, how are we going to get money? And I said, don't worry. Goodwill will solve the problem. They asked how. I said, it will. People came to give us posters. Some came, donated T-shirts. Some came, donated money and other materials.
Okay, let's not take the shine off MK Abiola, because that's who we're talking about. Let's forget what other administrations have done in this administration. I want to prod more on the line of compensation, because apart from declaring June 12th, one thing we all failed to realize that the president also did was he gave MK Abiola full honors of GCFR. And the only person I know that he is a GCFR in this country has to be a president. So does it mean history books have to be rewritten?
No.
Because GCFR, what you're saying automatically is MK Abiola was once president in this country. And because a lot of people didn't report too much on that honor of GCFR. It was full honors. What are we taking up on that?
There were conversations around it. When that award was given, I quickly told people in that conversation that this is a president that have come to tell us that Abiola won that election by the affirmation on that event that happened, for him to have given or bestowed posthumously on Abiola. So we need not go far, even in the law court, we need not go far. So he has told us that President Abiola, you understand, have come to be.
So it's safe to
The
say
next step,
former President MK Abiola.
definitely. The next step will now be, how do we address it within the context of the constitutional provision that we have in Nigeria? If you declare Abiola today, I'm talking like a layman now, if you declare Abiola today as president, which has been done through that award, then it also means that there will be a lacuna created. People, the vice might have to come and claim legitimacy, and it means that you have to sack the present administration. You are going to throw the country into turmoil. I'm thinking very openly.
But let's think wildly about it, because, or didn't the president think it through when they said GCFR? Because once you say GCFR,
You want to say something?
I can clarify this issue. I think we're putting the cart before the horse here. I think it's a simple matter. What the president has done is just addressed an injustice in the past, nothing more. Abiola is not going to come out the grave and become president. The idea now is, once this has been done, the next thing that should be that we should now start lobbying for is to ask INEC. Obviously, back then it was NEC, but we need to ask INEC to release those results.
Okay.
Now, releasing those results is not going to take us back to 1993 or in 2019.
Yes.
Release the results. Once the results are released and he's proclaimed president, then we can now start to discuss. The GCFR was a posthumous honor. He was honoring my father for his role in bringing democracy.
But that's the highest
together.
national honor, which only a president
which is understood.
Can get that
Which
honor.
is understood. So it's also implied that my father won the election. The only way that would be law, or that would be correct, would be for INEC to officially release the remaining results, the remaining states, and announce the winner. Once that is done, the National Assembly should get to order. And I think once the Mr. President had done the award, what happened? The National Assembly jumped up to work. They came up with democracy. They had to do the change of day between May 29 and June 12, which they did pass. The Senate also passed it. That's why we have June 12 Democracy Day now. The idea would be, if, in moving forward, the idea would be for them to actually publicly release the results and announced, and then from there we can now start talking about what belongs to the expert. I think that would make it official. I think if that's what we're looking for, but not saying that, even if that makes it official, that King Ibe will want to be president. That doesn't work that way. Okay. It's just rewriting the wrongs of the past.
For obvious reasons, I want to talk about women in politics. Kudirat Abiola mobilized market women, students, human rights community to stand up against a repressive military regime. When you look at women in politics today, are you impressed? I mean, there seems to be a death and a significant decline. Just looking at the National Assembly alone, the numbers have, declined again for the 9th National Assembly. What would you propose to ensure that more women participate in politics? And I'm not talking about tokenism. I'm talking about gender-balanced government. We've seen it in Ethiopia. We've seen it recently in South Africa. So it can be done. It's not an excuse of it cannot be done.
Well, I come from a school of thought that says that you don't sacrifice competence at the altar of self-pity. As much as I support the affirmative action, I also support the idea and process where we energize the system and allow the women to blossom to their full potential. And how do I mean? Recently in the UK, Theresa May was elected. They did not elect Theresa May because she's a woman. In Germany, the head of government, I think she's been elected for the 3rd or 4th time.
Yeah, Angela Merkel.
In Brazil, a woman was elected as president. So it means that we must energize the women of Nigeria to get more organized, because numerically they're in large number. If they can organize very well and we give them the right enablement, who tells you that a woman cannot be the next president of Nigeria? Why must I give you 30% when you can take all of it? I take 100%. Yes, in terms of, say, appointments, we can look at that route. But don't teach that to the upcoming women. Otherwise, they will stay sticked to that idea of 30%. Teach them that you can reach for the heights and you can become the best in society and you can be the crown. Don't teach them to restrict their movement
To the kitchen.
to a number. No, don't do that. Teach them that they can be the first among the lot. That is what we should be preaching. Because in terms of number, we have more women. Yeah. If you look at economic gains now, you have more women getting jobs than the men. You have more women coming into, the entrepreneurial system than the men. Yeah. In terms of pockets, deep pockets, you have more women with deep pockets now. Yeah. Really? Definitely. Stand on your street there. Count 100 vehicles that pass. Okay. You will see that the women will drive about 60 to 70% of vehicles.
Okay, but what if it's your husband's car? But it's fine. No, we'll wrap it up on that note. It's always a joy talking to you, sir.
Thank you.
And most importantly, thank you so much for coming here. I really appreciate it. We'll definitely have more with you. And comrade, thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you so much. Yeah.